Hello, guys. We are back today in another episode of Into Miyazaki's World, and in our team today we have this is Betty.
And Avery.
Yes. So before officially getting started on the movie today, we want to do briefly jump back on the ending of the previous episode. We're talking about the wind rises. And my apologies for ending it so oddly, but do you guys remember where we discussed at the end, or maybe having any final thoughts about that?
Yeah, so Miss Betty had to go to work. She had to put those hours in, so we did not get to give our final ratings and opinions of the film. So returning back to my notes, I had a pretty positive opinion of this film. I really enjoyed it. I'm gonna give it a 4.5 out of 5. Because I do think that there was elements that were done in other Ghibli movies better, but I really, really enjoyed this film. So that's my rating. What about you, Betty?
I rate it 5/5 because I love it so much. Except for the music, it's kind of odd some part, but overall it's very good. And I think there's some kind of feeling that browsing while I was watching this movie. So I love it so much. I'm more about the emotional I experience for the movie. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and I feel like I dream a lot. And there's some part that I was so scared of the fast change of time because for my major media it's changed so quickly, and sometimes I got scared of that, but I'm still passionate about that. So I feel connected with Jiro, and maybe that's why I love this movie so much.
That's so cute. I,
Yeah.
I think I liked it for reasons more along just we live in a society. Because I feel like this movie really just captures that Jiro at the end of the day, he can make his own decisions, but he really is just this one moving part of a much larger picture. And it's kind of scary to imagine like that you're just this little piece in this bigger, much bigger machine or picture. But yeah, and before we get on to Nausicaa, we actually have Sarah here to drop by to give her rating. She was a part of our Wind Rises discussion, so I'm gonna invite her over. Okay, here's the microphone.
Get closer, Miss Girl.
Okay. Hi, y'all. So interesting format. Sorry. Yes, I'm here. I didn't watch this movie, so I will not be talking about it. But for The Wind Rises, I'd say initially I would have given it a lower rating because I found the romance to be like a little bit rushed and not as believable. But after we kind of like analyzed it more and got into it, and I realized like actually I kind of loved it. Like now that I like talked about it more, I'd say I give it like a 4 or 5 out of 5. Like it was really good. It was one of the better Ghibli movies that I've watched. So
What a 180.
oh my god, yeah.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Of course.
Yes, we love Sarah. We might see her next week or in the
Yeah.
future. So if you want more Sarah content, don't worry.
Okay, awesome thoughts, guys. So I really appreciate it. And so let's just be gone with the wind, and we'll go back to another movie also talking about the wind. It's not intentional, but I just found it is very interesting to connect it somehow. But yeah, so from this moment, we're going to discuss Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. And this movie is very interesting because it can be unofficially called Ghibli movie because it's written and like not produced, but written by Miyazaki and produced by the co-founder of Studio Ghibli, Isao Takahata. And just after 1 year of the movie's out, Studio Ghibli was found. So I think it's very
Oh.
interesting. And yeah, so before getting started and give spotlight back to Avery for her summary, here's a little disclaimer for spoiler. So we're going to discuss many details from the movie. So if you plan to watch the movie fully, we recommend you to save our episode now and get back to us later. But if you really don't mind, I'm just passing to Avery now.
Yeah, so absolutely. This is our first Miyazaki non-Ghibli work. But like she said, a lot of people associate it with Ghibli. The movie came out in 1985, which is a year before our Ghibli debut film, Castle in the Sky. And also, I believe, the Fireflies, which we haven't spoken about that one yet. But yeah, so those came out in 1986. But we're going to go back a year before the founding of Ghibli and talk about this wonderful piece. So Nausicaa of the Wind and Valley, it's this fantasy sci-fi dystopian film. It's set 1,000 years into the future after an environmental disaster, which kills off most of the human population on Earth. And so the story follows Princess Nausicaa and her attempt to save her community from the toxic jungle and also the threat of the warring civilizations that humanity has kind of just really declined and fallen into just war, famine, and then the environmental degradation is, of course, a big issue. Yeah, so that's my little synopsis.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
just follow our traditional. I think we might start with the word building if you would like to talk about that, because I think
Yeah.
this movie is honestly very different from other Ghibli movie we're talking about. And for me, I really impressed about the very first opening of the movie, because I noticed it's nearly 2 minutes at the beginning of the movie, doesn't have music, which they usually have something, but it's just like the sound of the wind. And I think
Yeah.
it's very interesting.
Yeah, no, it for sure. This is a different introduction than we usually see. I would say a typical Miyazaki Ghibli film, we have this kind of gradual overview of the world that we're in. We kind of get to know it up close and far away, and then we almost always are accompanied by some lovely music, often by Joe Yashi, or I probably just butchered his last name, but yeah, we love Joe here. So yeah, this one was very different. There could be multiple reasons for that. Another thing to note is that this film is based off of a manga. So Nausicaa was also, the name itself was inspired by apparently a Phoenician princess in the Odyssey by Homer. So I thought that was just kind of some interesting research I saw. But yeah, so this opening scene, we do get to see a lot of the world, which is typically like Miyazaki's tradition, but it's definitely not the same. The setting, and I would just say maybe even like the art style is a lot more, it kind of falls a little flat, I would say, compared to like other Ghibli films. I really enjoyed watching this one because it's amazing film on its own, but also you just get to see how much Miyazaki has grown. Because like the depths of the colors in this film compared to something like Howl's Moving Castle or The Wind Rises, like the richness in color like has just completely changed. But yeah, we're kind of introduced to this society. It kind of had a, have you seen The Mandalorian, Betty?
I have not.
Do you know what it is though? The Mandalorian?
No.
Star Wars?
Yes.
Okay, to me,
Okay.
it kind of felt a little Star Wars-ish, but there's no aliens, actually. I think it's just because it's so far in the future that, and also we have this toxic jungle, so the insects kind of look alien-like. So I was getting like this alien fantasy dystopian vibe. But yeah, it's like this idea that the earth is being consumed by this toxic jungle. And then some context, it's 1,000 years has passed since the fall of industrial society. And so the earth has been taken over by this jungle, and it's just this big ecological disaster. But yeah, what were some of your thoughts?
Yeah, touch on some what you're saying. I feel the same. It's like very different setting that Ghibli just brought up compared to other later movie that Miyazaki made. Yeah, it's not like post-war words. It's not during the time of the war. It's not like during peacetime either. Just like very far and dark future of human beings. And like you just say, it's give the vibe of like sci-fi movies, like in Star Wars. And I think the thing that make this movie outstanding is maybe because it's not like dealing with aliens, even though it's kind of similar, like what you just said, but it's focused more on like how like environmental pollution like destroy everything,
Yeah.
or just like affect seriously the world. I don't know if it's but it's just like
Yeah, no, I agree. And to me, I think that's what I like so much about this film because I'm such a sucker for any environmental theme, which is probably why my favorite Ghibli film so far has been Princess Mononoke, this one strikes a lot of parallels to Princess Mononoke, which we'll talk more about. But yeah, I really enjoy this environmental theme, even though it's it's depressing in the aspect of this is a dystopian society. This is not a future that we want, but we're very much going towards with our behavior on this planet and the way we treat it. But yeah, we'll get more into the environmental theme later. Another thing to note on is the score. So like we said, Joe, he got out, he really produced something really interesting and beautiful with this soundtrack. The music is just so funky and it's just older. It's like very 80s, which this film did come out in the 80s. But it was so fun. It was so different than the typical like orchestra pieces we get in the other Ghibli films. So yeah, what did you think about the music?
No, I love it so much. This is the very first Ghibli soundtrack that I used the most for my studying, and I know it's where it's come from, but I have not watched the movie until now. And for me, I love all the soundtrack that give me strong feelings. So this one also similar to House Moving Castle and Labuta Castle in the Sky. They always give me like some strong feelings. Like it's very tense at the very beginning, and then just soften, and then it's just raised up again. So I think it's very interesting, and yeah. And I noticed that some parts of the movie, especially when Nausicaa is just fighting or flying away, the soundtrack just give me a vibe like I am playing a video games.
Oh, yeah, I could see that.
I love that. I love that part so much.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's honestly like the 80s feel to the soundtrack. It's kind of
Yeah.
like He-Man almost. But yeah, also I would say that the music really changes depending on what's going on in the scene. So we kind of have like more of that like 80s like retro sound, but then we also have more whimsical pieces depending on the context, and then we have this kind of continued theme of like this little girl singing. So, and we'll talk about it later, but we're pretty sure it's Nausicaa as a child. But yeah, I mean, also talking about sound in general, so not specifically music, the sounds they make for the advanced technology they have, I just thought was really interesting. Like, I don't know, do you know what the thing she flies on is called? Her flyer.
Yeah, I don't know what it's called.
I would
either.
just call it a flyer.
It looks
but
like
yeah.
a plane, but it's not
plane.
a plane.
I mean, if we could talk a bit about the design of that, because I feel like that could go with world building, is like their technology, because
Mhm.
this is a very technologically advanced society technically, because it exists 1,000 years in the future, so they have technology that we haven't developed yet. However, because of the ecological disaster, they don't live like a technologically advanced society, or what you'd imagine at least. So it's just kind of interesting to see that people are starving and people are dying, but they have like these really like high tech like vehicles to fly. And it's really cool because you quite literally like look like a bird when you're flying on it, because like her feet go up. But yeah, I thought like the imagery and the design of that was so creative on Miyazaki's part. Like I just thought that was, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I love that part too. And I think it's tied really well with the idea of how people trying to use technology that really fit in to protect the environment as well. Because the design of the flyer, like what we just called the flyers, just remind me of like the kite and the way they like anchor the flyers. Also like how you fly a kite.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I know, I 100% see that too. Very creative designs on their part. I liked it a lot.
Mhm.
Because we see like the typical airships, but we've seen that before. We've seen that in Castle in the Sky. We've seen that in The Wind Rises. So I think Nausicaa's personal like flying device is just a lot more fun, because it kind of also reminds me of a paper airplane that they've made out of metal or whatever technology. But yeah, do you have any more comments on world building? And then I had a few about like the medieval aspects.
You can move to the medieval
Medi-
aspect. Yeah, I cannot.
So, what I mean by medieval aspects, okay, me personally, I thought I was picking up on some medieval references, because it's interesting, because we're in this science fiction setting. This is in the future, apocalyptic, yet I feel like there's a lot of imagery and details that are just so like Middle Ages, Europe specifically. So from the garments, like their actual clothing, and a lot of the times men or women kind of had like those head coverings in the film, that to me was pretty strong, like a strong medieval reference. It was more of like a futuristic version. Like it's not in a direct imitation. It just seems inspired by it, in my opinion, like feudal society. And then also this idea that we have like all these scattered societies that are really kingdoms, like they're called kingdoms, and you have a princess, you have a king, you have a lord, so kind of like typical feudal society titles. So I thought that was interesting. And then also there's an emphasis on ideas of fate and destiny. So we have this character, Obaba, who sounds suspiciously a lot like you, Baba, from Spirited Away. So I don't know if that's connected. But anyways, so she's kind of like this, I don't know, she kind of is giving like just like wise old woman. Maybe she like has a second sight because she seems to be super interested in like destiny and prophecy. But anyways, they have like this tapestry predicting like that this savior will come and save the valley and, stop the toxic jungle. And I just thought that to me was also a very like fantastical, like medieval element. And then later when we have Kushana show up and try to conquer them, she uses I put in quotation natives, as in just like the people that were living there, which is the valley people. I'll call them the valley people. She uses them for essentially slave labor to exploit the resources, which this could also be a comment on colonialism or imperialism. I'm not sure, but it could also just be more of like a feudal reference to how kingdoms, more powerful, bigger kingdoms would show up and like just conquer, take over, pillage all the resources and then enslave the people that were living there. And then also this one was pretty big for me. When Kushana takes hostages, and hostages is a reoccurring thing in this film. So we have Lestel, who is our first example of a hostage, and then later Nausicaä herself is a hostage. That is such a medieval practice. I'm not saying like other cultures or societies didn't have that, but 100% did exist in the Middle Ages. So yeah, I noticed that too. And then this last one, which is might be a little bit of stretch. This is just my interpretation, is that Nausicaa's room, so she has like those secret passageways, right, that lead down to like the catacombs, like where her laboratory is. To me, that reminded me so much of, do you know who Queen Antoinette is?
I heard.
Yeah, the French, the French queen who was like, let's eat cake, which I think it's historically inaccurate. I don't think she ever said that. But anyways, yeah, so there was this protest where French Parisian, I believe they're Parisian, women were protesting like right outside of the palace for bread because everyone was starving. And so they actually like broke in and like started up a revolt and were trying to, probably kill her or ransom her or something. And she escaped through like some like passageways or something. So I don't know, it just kind of reminded me of that because we do know that like in a lot of these medieval like castle designs that there were like hidden passageways for members of the royal family to escape if the castle was ever sieged. So I don't know, those are the references I picked up on. I just thought it was interesting.
No, I think it's very interesting because you focus more on how the world building give you the vibe of like the older society compared to what we're living at right now and compared to what the film is trying to show to the audience of like the reality of the future. But it's kind of like jump a little bit backward too.
Yeah, it's such a crazy like tribrid blend of just like different cultural and time period elements. And I think that's what makes the film so visually cool to watch, is that there's just so much going on and there's so much details. But in some areas, I think Betty would agree, too much detail. Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Do you want to explain that?
Yeah, I don't know, but I do enjoy the movie a lot, but there's some part because of my phobia, so I'm afraid of like some holes.
Yeah.
So there's basically there's a part I remember like Aspel.
Aspel.
Yeah, Aspel and Nausicaä just fell from their plans to the underground part, and when they looked up looking for those space to escape, I mean, I know that I have to go through those holes to get out of there, but the way they always look up and look at those things, it just give me some goosebumps because I'm afraid of like looking at a lot of holes. And yeah.
I will say, like, the setting in general, because, you know, there's this toxic component, there's this toxic jungle, there's just some very, like, abstract and just, like, disturbing looking patterns in the film.
Yeah.
Like, in the plants and just in the actual background, there's just some, like, sensory, like, visual sensory, like, moments that are just, like,
Yeah.
so I think it's supposed to make you uncomfortable because I think that's kind of the point is that in this society, humanity has destroyed the earth so much. It's beyond recognition. And we took advantage of the earth because, you know, right now it's a beautiful day in Tulsa. There's flowers, you know, really enjoying that. And kind of to see how this society that they're living in, like all of that is gone. And it's just kind of replaced with this wasteland almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree. But I do enjoy the movie though. Even though it's just give me some scary feeling, but yeah. Okay, so we touch on the main theme of the movie, maybe. So how about talking about the environment and some natural resources, like what I just titled my section.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So like I think we both agree that this movie is focused a lot on like how the environment change and affect like human being back and forth. So yeah, I do notice like we have an extreme air pollution for you where people have to wear not normal mask but gas mask. And it's also remind me of the current pandemic we suffer, COVID-19 or SARS, but people also have to wear a lot of masks to avoid spreading the disease. But in this case of the movie, everything just be more serious because the air is the thing that is polluted. And all the pollution also happened at the same time in the movie where the water is also poisoned when Nausicaa's trying to stop the the baby insect, to not like go into the water. It just like pushed Nausicaa and her food somehow touched the water and it's burned. So it just showed how like the air is polluted, but other natural resources like water and the wind also is also somehow spread the polluted as well. And it's also recall a lot of like fighting and severe scenes from Princess Mononoke, but I don't have a lot of reference, but I'm sure Avery have a lot connects to Princess Mononoke, so
Yeah, I would say so I did see a lot of parallels. I guess a big difference though that we should state is that in this society, this is kind of like I don't want to say the revenge of nature because I don't think that nature is intrinsically ever going to try to be evil towards humanity. I just think it's more like in this case, humanity has entirely pushed nature to the point where it had to evolve in the only way it could in order to survive. And that way manifested in some way that is toxic for people. And so, you know, we have like these mushroom spores that release these toxic particles and all of that. And so to me, that's just such a big contrast between this film and Princess Mononoke, where in Princess Mononoke, for the most part, that forest is actually very healthy and very much like in tune with you know, equilibrium and everything. And so that's why we have the little Kodokama forest spirits, because they're there to indicate that the forest is healthy. And so Princess Mononoke is, you know, more about like before we even get to this stage. In Nausicaa of the Wind and Valley, it's as if Lady Eboshi was never defeated or never changed her mind. If she had kept going on that path, this is the society you end up with. So that's kind of how I view the two. But then another comparison is that I found that the prince Ashitaka, I believe is his name.
yeah.
It's been a while. He like reminds me so much of Nausicaa. Like they have similar characteristics and drives. They both really want to be at peace with nature, and they work really hard to like maintain such a like respectful understanding of nature. Like the way Nausicaa interacts with the Ohms, I think is so beautiful. And it calls me back to the scene where Nausicaa's Lord Yupa, yeah, Lord Yupa is in trouble with the Ohm, and the Ohm is coming to essentially kill him. And Nausicaa, instead of just, you know, coming in to save Yupa and kill the beast, no, like she tries to communicate with it and get it to turn back around. She uses kind of like her insect, I don't know what they called it. charm
Yeah.
thing that kind of like, it's like hypnosis, I guess. But yeah, she's just like, what an amazing ohm. And then she tells it, go back to the jungle. This is not your world, which just shows how much compassion and dedication she has to the environment. And so, like I said, it reminds me of Princess Mononoke. It reminds me of the scene of Ashitaka in the Cursed Bull. And because in this instance, Nausicaa has the ability to calm the rage of the beast and return it to the jungle. Ashitaka did not have that chance because the bull was under a curse, an evil curse. And I kind of think that if he had been able to break that curse on the bull, I do think he would have tried to calm its rage and return it to the forest the same way Nausicaa returns the ohm to the jungle. So I just see so many like similarities between their characters.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting when you brought up the board with the Om as well, because I think there's a little bit different between them, because the board, like you just say, is plied with rage, so just like trying their best to kill as many people as possible to protect themselves in the trap. But for the Om, when at the very ending of the movie, when Nausicaa just like sacrificed herself to stop like the range, I feel like the Oms just like understand the situation, so that's why they stop everything after like they hit Nausicaa just like up to the air and then fall off and
Yeah,
temporarily die. But
absolutely.
yeah,
I think also that in Nausicaa's world, the earth being polluted in the curse, it has plagued onto not just humanity but also like nature itself. I think it manifests in a way to where these creatures don't become blind with rage for no reason, and they're able to like become reasoned out of it, because they do have emotion and they do have compassion. Whereas in Princess Mononoke, pollution was depicted as more of like just like this curse that could not be broken. So I mean, we kind of get that different just interpretation or like depiction of pollution. Is it a curse or is it just something that manifests as poison? Because in this case, it's not really a curse, it's just literal poison, radioactivity, toxins, all of that. We see that Nausicaa's father early in the film is actually dying because he's been poisoned just over time, like in the atmosphere. And it kind of made me wonder, like, is this the fate of all people that live in the valley? To die from, the toxins that are exposed to them in the air. But they do feel more safe living in the valley because they have this belief that, I'm trying to find it, they have this belief that like the wind coming off from the ocean breeze like protects them from the poison to a certain extent, like it kind of washes it away maybe.
yeah, I think Obaba mentioned about that when she brought up like the oversea wind that protect this land to from the
Yeah.
disease. So,
Maybe
yeah.
we can talk a bit about just their civilization in general, because Nausicaa's, I don't know if we want to call it a village, a valley, a community, a kingdom, whatever. But, where Nausicaa is from, this society is probably one of the best examples, I think, in the Ghibli film of a community that is actually trying to like live in harmony with nature and is doing it pretty well. They're very we get this sense that they're spiritual people to a certain extent. We know that Obaba believes in fate and destiny, along with the whole tapestry prophecy of a savior coming. And we know that they really encourage and appreciate Nausicaa's ability to like communicate with nature. And multiple times they make references to this, such as when Lord Yuba is first saved by her, she says what a mysterious power she has because she's able to tame the fox squirrel, Tato?
Yeah,
Is that his name?
Tato.
Yeah, she's able to tame him pretty quickly, which you reminded me of my dog. I think anything that's tiny and cute just reminds me of my dog. It's Bo.
Yeah. No, I love the idea you brought up, and yeah, I feel this movie's just brought up so many interesting things about like environment that I do really enjoy. So yeah,
I had another good quote, real quick,
yeah, sure.
about the environment. So, Lord Yupa again says about Nausicaa, she certainly knows how to read the wind. I just wanted to throw that one out there because this will probably be more relevant later. We'll talk a little bit about the wind and its relationship with Nausicaä. And then also this idea that I mentioned of the savior who's going to return and then guide the people to a land of purity. A quote I have is that the savior will restore mankind's connection with the earth that was destroyed, which very much reminds me of what the old man in Castle of the Sky, the one that lives like underground, Uncle something.
Yeah, Uncle Bomb.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Uncle Palm. He says something very similar, I think. But yeah, no, I just think it's amazing that Nausicaa is able to be such a liaison with nature. She really knows the jungle, and she will point this out numerous times later, such as when the queen, or she's not a queen, she's a princess, I guess. What's her name? Kushana?
Kushana.
Yeah.
It's a hard name.
Kushana, yeah. There's a lot of names in this one. Kushana, you know, she has her gun, and Nausicaa's like, yeah, you know, I wouldn't shoot that if I were you. You don't know the jungle like I do. But yeah.
Yeah, and she also have a very optimistic point of view toward the sea of the decade. Decade or decade? Decade?
Decade.
Yeah, decade. So yeah, she has a quote that I wrote down here. She's just say like, the trees of the sea of the decade grew to cleanse the world polluted by the humans. So yeah, I feel like she has a very optimistic and very general view of what actually happening. It's just like she's not trying to claim to any size. She like Ashitaka, she in a very neutral place to try to balance between the two. So.
Absolutely. And she's so compassionate, which is something that I just admire so much about her character. Is her ability again and again to sacrifice herself and her potential to be harmed because she wants to protect nature and protect people, just protect life in general. It's very beautiful. And the quote you mentioned, I just find it so fascinating the way the ecosystem works. Because essentially, the little area that Nausicaa and Asbel. Oh my gosh, these names, guys. I think it's because they're supposed to be futuristic, I guess. Nausicaä and Asbel, when they find they fall through the sand and they find that underground cavern, like we realize that, you know, you can't burn down the jungle. All these other kingdoms, they think, oh, the jungle is the problem. We just need to burn it down. They want to fight with fire. But Nausicaa and Asbel realize, no, like we cannot burn down the jungle because even though parts of it are toxic, the way the ecosystem is all connected, it's also working to filter the toxins out. So the jungle may be toxic right now, but it seems that the trees and the roots are actually filtering those toxins out. And so it seems if they wait long enough, the jungle will just detoxify itself because of the way the ecosystem works. So,
yeah. It's very interesting.
We're not patient, I guess, humans.
Yeah. And I love the way they brought up the differences between human-made resources and natural resources. So I don't know if I quoted right, but I just want to point out the difference between the fire and the water and the wind itself. Because fire is just like an event that's caused by the process of combustion, if I'm right. Yeah. So it just like occur when the oxygen in the air in some sort of fuel that make the fire, but mostly created by humans being activities. And yeah, throughout the movie we see a lot of fire, which is from the fire gun or the bomb. And I feel like the movie suggested the possibilities that can happen to the world, like if the firestorm, for example, the real event from the bombing event of Hiroshima and Nagasaki during the World War II, if that event just prolonged for like up to 7 days, like what the movie referenced, the 7 days of fire in the movie.
Oh yeah.
So if that happened, it could cause like the nuclear winter event, which is will like blocking all the sunlight and lead to a lot of like severe things to the world. And I feel like the ending scenes where the giant warrior just shot like at the groups of arms and explode everything, I read somewhere it also based on the real image of the nuclear bomb explosion during the World War II. So I thought it's very interesting when it show like how people use their resources to fight against what the natural resources. And yeah,
That
so
that is really interesting. That makes so much
yeah,
sense because this film is a Japanese film.
yeah.
Miyazaki is Japanese, so he would have that input or influence into the film. Because it never mentions a nuclear disaster or bombing in the film. It never mentions it directly, but just looking at the way the setting is and the fact that there's all these toxic particles and the king seems to have like radiation poisoning, it does seem like, nuclear fallout. This is a society that is trying to rebuild after that. So yeah, no, I
Yeah.
didn't think of that. That's interesting.
Yeah, and the way I brought up the wind and the water, I don't think the movies directly talk about it that much, but I really love a quote from one of the hostage while they were caught, and that old man just talking about his hand, like how Nausicaa loved his hand, and then they switch to the topic. They just say like too much fire and nothing will grow. Fire can turn forests into ashes in a single day. Water and wind sustain the forest for 100 years. And I kind of love this one so much because I feel like fire can make people feel like they are very like powerful. Like how the Tomekian people just believe that a giant warrior will help them and stop everything. But in fact, it's just like they cost more life just to fulfill the whole thing. So it's kind of recall me
Yeah.
of like how we deal with zombies.
Zombies.
Yeah, cause have you watched All of Us Are Dead? The
No.
movie. It's the K drama. So it's about zombies and the government solution for that pandemic. It just like bomb the whole cities
Oh my
to burn
God.
everything. Like the
Yeah.
city in the danger zone, they just want to burn anything so that no more disease can spread. And it just called back to what I brought up an interpretation in Labuta. Like I just say like cut up the bad roots for brighter future, and I feel that it was the right thing in that movie. But for now, applying that into this
Yeah.
case, I feel like it's very inhuman act if you just sacrifice more life just to save the rest.
Yeah, it really
Um,
depends. Like I
yeah,
agree because in that context, yeah, no. Kind of same idea with when the valley is in danger. The Peji lights, I don't know what they go by. The Peji people. I'm sorry, these futuristic names have me struggling. But they're just like, oh no, it's for the greater good. Risking the few for the many. But yeah, no, that doesn't always work out. But we do see a few examples where it does make sense. For example, they want to stop the infection from spreading on the trees, so they'll like burn down just parts of the trees, but then they go a little crazy and they start burning down the whole forest. So yeah, it's like moderation is key, and also having that early intervention before it spirals into something that's out of control.
yeah.
And then that's when you have to make those very difficult ethical decisions of how you're going to handle it. I also like that you brought up, don't know his name, but the hostage guy as well that says we prefer the ways of the water and the wind. Because in that instance, he's just it kind of reminded me of from, what is it called? The Wind Rises. When they're like, oh, we don't need to be like Italy and we don't need to be like Germany. Like we can go our own way. That's kind of what that reminded me of. And it reminds me of another similar scene in which, what's her name? Kushana.
Yeah.
Kushana is with them when she was the hostage. It's her turn to be the hostage. And she's like, well, if I were you guys, I would just take over and use the big weapon, the underground warrior thing. I would use it to your advantage. And she's like, take it for yourself. The insects must be stopped either way. And they're like, yeah, listen, lady, we're not going to take advice from you, first of all. And they kind of just say something like, no, we will keep the warrior dormant as it was always intended to be. So to me, they have a lot of these little Wind Rises moments where they're being pressured to do something that everyone else in society is presenting as a logical solution, but they're like, no, because this goes against our cultural and our moral beliefs, and we're gonna go about it our own way. And I
Yeah.
really like that they stick to their ideology.
Yeah, it's very interesting because like who know how people will act if they in that situation. And I really like the comparison that Nausicaa brought up to compare what's her name again?
Kushana.
yeah. Kushana and the little pet that she has, Tito, the little swerve.
So cute.
Yeah,
The fox squirrel.
Yeah, she just compared Kushana just to Tito, that she's just now panic and scared.
Yeah.
So that's why she reacts so like, what's the word should I use? Severe or
Intense. I
yeah,
don't know.
intense. So that's just whatever.
Yeah, no, Kushana's character is so interesting because she's the Lady Eboshi of this film, where on that surface, she's pure evil because, you know, she's coming here to conquer this civilization so that she can exploit its resources and raise this giant to destroy not just the jungle, but destroy like competing kingdoms. So she's very cutthroat. She'll take hostages. She'll kill like without a second thought. However, she does have a sense of morally gray to her because, you know, in the end, we kind of see like this idea that she could be redeemable because she wants to delay to start the final battle until Nausicaä returns. And so I just kind of found that interesting. So I do think she has a small change of heart, but we never get to see the full like redemption cycle. So we don't actually know if she's gonna fully redeem herself or if she'll just fall back into old ways. And also I compared her to Lady Eboshi. I would like to say I don't think she's I think Lady Eboshi is not as bad as Kushana. I think Kushana is probably relatively worse, but it's also different societies. But it kind of reminds me of the quote in which one of the Valley men say, "It's so strange that you're a princess because you're nothing like ours." Because I think there is kind of like this character foil aspect between Nausicaä and Kushana. They're both princesses, but they both use their leadership qualities in very different ways. So they, you know, rule very differently. They have very different ideologies. They view the environment very differently. And I like that you bring up Kushana's fear, because I think that is something we talked about a lot in Castle in the Sky, is how mankind, it's so easy for us just to give in to our fears and be ruled by them. And, you know, at the end of the day, Nausicaä just wants to live her life, just wants them to leave her in her valley in peace. She's just like, she says, "I just want you to go back to your own country." When she said that, I kind of laughed a little.
Yeah, that's part funny. And similar to some of the characters we kind of touch on, I don't remember which one, but I wish we can have more background of Kushana, because I don't know what happened to her. Why did she lost like her legs and one arm? What happened to her? Because we don't have enough context, and I don't know, because of that, like the trauma she been through, that make her like harder to like lead like the way Nausicaa lead.
Yeah, and I think probably her injuries have a lot to do with her intense hatred for the jungle and just wanting to wipe it out entirely. Because she probably got this injuries, I would imagine, somewhat related to the jungle or creatures, insects within the jungle. Because she says at one point to the Valley Men, "How can you be so foolish? The jungle is harming you, yet you want to be in harmony with it." Like, she just can't even like comprehend this idea that the environment is not going out of its way to harm you, that this is all just a rippling reflection of events that happened 1,000 years ago. And someone needs to, you know, stand up and make a stand. Like, we cannot just keep competing against nature. We have to work with it. And so that's what makes Natsuko such a great character, is she is the person that is willing to stand up for that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So, do you have anything else to talk about this? Or I have one more about the wind, but
we can go ahead and go into the wind.
Okay, so for me, similar to how the wind represent in The Wind Rises, I feel like the wind in this movie also represent both the benefits and the drawbacks that it brought to human beings. So for the benefits, it's indeed save the people in the Valley of the Wind. Like, people in the valley utilize the power of the wind to push away the polluted air. Like, they build up some windmills, and they also are able to have clean water and good soil to plant crops. So that's why I've seen like there's a lot of like fields where people actually have like lands to grow plants and crops to survive. And besides of that, Nausicaa also discovered that the well water grows toxin-free plants life. So I feel like the wind also helped the people in the valley have enough sources to like maintain their normal life, but also like discover something that can give them the solution to solve everything just happened right now. But on the other hand, I feel like the wind also helped spread the disease and wars to the valley, because like what's that one called, the spore
Yeah.
yeah, the spore just like being spread from was brought from oops sorry was brought from the ship where Lasto was hostage, and they just fell into the valley, and the disease just start from there also.
The telecid, what are they called? The
Yeah.
telecid, the Ptolemaiceans.
Yeah,
Oh gosh,
it's
guys.
hard name,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's brought from that, and the wind just like blow it, and it's just on the trees, and more things just happen. So yeah, I feel like the wind is the very interesting figures that I want to focus on talking about. So I don't know, what do you thought about like the image of the wind in this
I
movie?
didn't interpret the wind as its own symbol, but it 100% is, and it has the capacity for that. So I don't have like an exact like formal thing written down. So just thinking off the top of my head, I think your interpretation is spot on. That we kind of see that nature in the form of wind in this case can both harm and benefit humanity. Just depends on how you respect it as a human and how you kind of choose to respond to it. Because like Betty said, the wind is not always beneficial because it is spreading the disease, this radioactive like particles and infection. But it also, if you don't work against it and you work with it, like Nausicaa does, it can do wonderful things. And she's constantly compared to the wind in multiple occasions. And I know at one point, whenever she's kind of making this big pacifist protest, so at the point in the movie where the Telemachian men they're in like their little, it looks like a little air balloon, and then they have the baby Ohm underneath. She wants to stop them and she wants to free the baby Ohm, and so she kind of does this act of protest where she just stands on her flyer and just flies at them with her arms like wide open to show like, I'm in protest, I'm not gonna inflict violence on you. And I believe that they make a comment like she flies like the wind, and then the younger man even thinks that she looks like Lestel. And so he's like, no, we can't kill her. It's Lestel. It's Lestel. So I just thought that was interesting. You probably thought that because they were like, she had changed into the Pageant clothes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it makes much more sense because I'm watching in the sub and they didn't mention like that's look like Lasto. So I was
Oh,
like,
really?
oh, what happening? Why do we stop? I was like, yeah, but
Oh,
it's
that's
make more
interesting.
sense now.
In the dub, he goes, I can't, it's Lestel, because the other guy's like, shoot her. And he's like, no, I can't, it's Lestel. But yeah, and then the older guy pushes him out of the way and shoots her anyways. But yeah, I mean, outside of the wind, or did you have anything else for the wind?
I do have two more things.
Yeah.
It's very like academic things,
I wanna
but
hear it.
I just wonder like what actually will happen if the wind stop blowing, because it brought up in the movie
Yeah.
at the very end, and I do
Mhm.
search up, and based on what I search, it just say like if the wind stop blowing, the moist air won't move around and the water might still evaporated, but it won't travel meaning anywhere away from a large body of water, so it would dry up. And plants, animal, and humans just slowly die because of dehydration, with most water just inaccessible as salt water and ice anymore. So yeah,
Interesting.
climate change and stuff like that. Yeah.
I love that because I took a more metaphorical approach. Whenever they're commenting that the wind has died, they also talk about how the atmosphere is saturated with anger from the Ohms because they're all heading towards the valley in a stampede because they think the baby has been taken. So kind of there, I guess I thought like the wind had gone away and been replaced by just like the intense anger of the Ohm. But I think it 100% can be both. It can have like the literal interpretation, which is scientific, because this movie is making a lot of scientific and environmental references, but then also like kind of this metaphorical, like spiritual aspect that I love that we explore nature, because to me, nature is not just, talking about the water cycle and like these scientific facts, which that is very important too. It's very important to understand these things. However, I think something that's often overlooked is the spiritual aspects of nature that has largely been just undermined because of the way that living in the United States, the way we've treated indigenous communities, because they had such a special connection with nature and they had a lot of that spiritual interpretation and context. And our country has just kind of obliterated. What am I trying to say? Obliterated? I'm sorry, guys. It's been a long day. Obliterated that. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what I mean. But yeah, so I just mentioned I have two, but I'm thinking, should I save it later? Because it's more about the meaning of the wind to Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli itself. So,
if you want to share it now, I think it fits.
yeah, so I just talk very briefly about that because it's not that much, but we will talk more about that in next episode where we discuss about the history of Studio Ghibli. But because Ghibli itself was chosen by Miyazaki to name his studio with Takahata, and the Ghibli itself means a hot desert wind. So Miyazaki just mean to tell the world that Studio Ghibli will blow like a new wind to the anime industry, and I think it's very cool. But this idea is also illustrated into Nausicaa's movie when Nausicaa's first vision happened when she was alone in the savannah, surrounded by a warm wind. So I found it's very interesting because it can be officially Studio Ghibli movie because it's created but not like from the Ghibli movie, like not from the studio of Ghibli. I messed up my word, but yeah, I just feel like it's very interesting because it's create the foundation for what happened later on. So yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, we're having a day, guys. I'm
long
so
day.
tired. It is a long day. It's Friday, but hey, that means it's the weekend. But hey, I think this was a really nice film to, end my Friday off with. I really enjoyed it. But yeah, so outside of the wind, did you have any more themes written down, or
For the environment,
just
or-
in general?
I have war.
Yeah. Do you want to get into that one?
Yeah.
It's another big theme. I would say we're really split between the environment and war. And I think that's why it recalls us so much of Princess Mononoke, as well as Castle in the Sky, because those were the two big themes in those movies, is war versus the environment, humanity versus the environment, and pacifism. Because we do know that Miyazaki has a lot of pacifist beliefs, which just basically mean nonviolence, anti-war. But he does show that, certain contexts do call for action. So, yeah, we can talk a little bit about that. For me, something that I just really picked up on is the growth of Nausicaa's character herself. Because Nausicaa does not start out as an entirely pacifist person. Whenever her father is killed, she goes into a blind rage and she kills multiple men. She was fighting with such like passion and grit. It reminded me of when San was fighting Lady Eboshi with her knife. It was a very intense and gritty scene. And Nausicaa even actually ends up accidentally stabbing Lord Yupa like through his hand, I believe. But yeah, so we see that this is where she starts, and then where she ends, where we talked about that scene where she's just flying at them with her arms open. She's not going to hurt anyone. We really do see her transformation as a character, and we also see that Nausicaa's blind rage in this instance is such a good parallel to the Ohm's blind rage at the end of the film, and I think it really explains why she's able to empathize with the Ohms so much, because she knows what it's like just to be totally consumed by anger and rage because you have been wronged and hurt really bad. But she kind of shows that violence is most of the time not the answer. And I say most of the time for a reason. Probably because there are some instances where she does have to use threats to get what she needs in order to save other lives. So I do think that's where we're kind of like finding a middle ground. You can't maybe always just be passive. In some situations, you are demanded to, have action, I guess.
Yeah, I do feel that in Nausicaa's character development as well. And the scene that stuck to my a lot the most, I would say, is the scene where she just hiding in her secret lab under the crowd, and when Laura Yuba just came to her and like talking about everything and stuff, and she explained why she built up the place, and then she just her emotion just broke out and she cried and just say like just she doesn't want any more killings. And I love that scene a lot. I don't have the quote here, but yeah, it just like
I have the
pop up
quote,
in my
I
mind.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't write this scene, but it sounds familiar. Okay, so she says, "I'm afraid of myself. I had no idea that my rage could drive me to kill. No more killing. It has to stop."
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
and then
part.
multiple times she says, "Stop it. All this killing has to stop."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it just I think it's very interesting to brought up that one because for me it's very a lot about physical war where people actually fight, but for most of other Ghibli movie I just feel like physical war is not like obviously there in the screen but more about the internal war. So yeah, I just found this one very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's because in this film, Nausicaa's quote unquote internal war has so much to do with the physical war. Because really, Nausicaa's psychological battle that she is facing is her endless bounds of compassion and how that doesn't match up to the reality that she lives in. The reality she lives in is really cruel. We have all these kingdoms that are fighting to the death. We have her valley being impacted by that. We have the toxic jungle hurting humans, but also humans hurting the nature of the jungle. And so there's just so much violence and conflict, and she just has so much compassion and kindness, and she's kind of having to reconcile with living in this society, living in this world. And I think that's really her psychological journey, and it's very much intertwined in the physical war itself. So I think that's why here it's not as distinct like we have an internal war, because like in Howl's Moving Castle we were able to split it up that way. We had the physical war and then the internal. This one, they're very much intertwined. You can't really separate them.
Yeah, I do like that. So do you have any more about that? Because I don't have a lot about war I touch on. Maybe because I've been distracted because of the holds, but I don't know. I wrote a little bit about a victim of the war because I want to know more what happened to Kushana. Because I still wonder, like she been through a lot, and she's also the victim of the war, so that's why she react like so, fiercely that way. And for Nausicaa, she like you just say most of the time trying to be a pacifist. She want to stop everything in peace and without any mass killing. So in some part she also cannot like control her emotion, especially when she heard the what's the name? The pechite? The
The pit, the people, the
yeah, the
Pagite.
trap where Aspel come from.
Yeah.
They just want to like open the mass killing to stop
Yeah.
everything. She just like being so panicked and she want to stop everything.
You know,
she just
the Pejites are so interesting because they are these people that have also been oppressed by Kushana in her reign, her empire, the Tolmekian, yeah, the Tolmekian Empire or kingdom. But at the same time, they're just as bad as the Tolmekians, just in different ways. And so we see multiple times where they're very defensive, where Aspel's like, we are nothing like those Tolmekians. But even Aspel comes to realize by the end that, hey, maybe they're actually not that different because they're not doing the right thing either. They have the same kind of like, let's just burn the jungle ideology. They just don't think that it should be the Tolmekians who get to use the warrior weapon. So I don't know. It's interesting, but we do see that they're not as good as they portray themselves to be. For example, they actually destroyed their own kingdom, it seems.
Yeah.
There was some sort of financial maybe exchange with the Tolmekians that led to them doing that. And then also we know that the Pejites intend to lure the insects into Nausicaa's valley, as Betty said. And I just remember when Nausicaa discovers us, she immediately starts crying and just is like, what a monstrous thing to do. And they try to tell her, no, it's for the good of the planet. They genuinely seem to care what Nausicaa thinks, because I don't think the Pageites want to be the bad guys. I think they're trying to justify it so they don't have to deal with that guilt. But then when Nausicaa, she's the princess of the valley, they're about to just go murder everybody in. She starts crying and they're like, oh, well, it's for the good of the planet. And she's like, for the good of the planet? What does she say? You'll kill my people. You're just as bad as the Tomikians. So it's just, they really think they have no other choice. But at the end of the day, they do. They absolutely do have another choice.
Yeah, they're just making an excuse like the Tomekian people just use the giant warrior just for destruction. But actually, they did the same. It's just another excuse for construction. So I was...
Yeah. And I think we also see, especially with the Pageites, because we don't really get to see the Tolmekian society. We just see the leaders. But with the Pageites, we actually get to meet their people. And so it establishes this other theme that is very, like, incorporated into war, and it's so complex. It's the difference between the government and the decisions that the government makes versus the people themselves. And so in this case, their government, their leadership is making a horribly wrong decision to kill off Nausicaa's people for the greater good, quote unquote. But the Pageite people, they're very sympathetic of Nausicaa, especially considering that she's helped Asbel, and she's also helped Listel, and was there as she died. And so it's really sweet to see Listel's mother, Listel and Asbel's mother, come to save her and says, please forgive us. What our people did was horribly wrong. And just the way that the whole community is really backed behind this decision to let her go. To me, that part actually made me cry just because it's so sweet. And that poor mother, lost her daughter.
Yeah, no.
That part made me sad.
That part got me too. So, yeah.
But yeah, and so then she ends up leaving. But then we see, Nausicaa's, internal drive for compassion once again, because as Nausicaa is escaping, the Tomikians return to attack the Pageite people on their ship. And so she's kind of like, I can't just leave them. I can't leave you guys like this. But Asbel tells her to go or he will never forgive herself. And pushes her out, so she doesn't really get a choice. And I think that, again, kind of shows the psychological conflict of Nausicaa. Is she wants to save everyone, but she can't,
Mm-hmm.
She's kind of having to choose between her people and the Pageites in that moment.
Yeah. No, I feel like this movie put everybody into a very controversial situation that they cannot actually tell what is right to do or what is wrong to do. So, yeah.
I 100% agree. And I think it's just so hard for a character like Nausicaa because she's so optimistic, she's so compassionate, and she cares about everyone. And so when she's put in these decisions, it's so hard for her to make a choice. Whereas someone like Kushana, she's a lot more cutthroat and she's used to making these decisions. She has and she will. So it's not as difficult for her. Whereas Nausicaa is going to try to figure out a way to where everyone can be happy and everyone can be okay and survive. And in the end, she does it, but at the cost of her own life.
Yeah.
So.
But she's is being helped and revived anyway, so it's a happy ending.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, but the scenes where Nausicaa just like temporarily fade and fell into some illusion. I feel like the flashback of her childhood maybe having something to do with the way she react currently. So I don't know, what do you think about that? Because that scene give me a little bit confused because I don't know what's going on. Is that a flashback of the word before the tossing happened, or like is that the part of the Wind Valley where everybody still say the same? Or I don't know what the setting is actually taking place on, or is that the word she dreamed that
These
is
are good
going
questions.
to happen?
These are good questions. I do have my personal interpretation, but there's 1,000 other ones, most likely. So I found these scenes to be a flashback to her childhood. So I did think that they were real. I thought they were memories, maybe a little altered because she's recalling them from childhood. And part of the reason I think that is because of the score, because it's a little girl singing and it's just one little girl. So we're pretty sure it's Nausicaa. So that's the kind of vibe I get. And especially in that last kind of vision or glimpse into the past we get, it really was the moment of realization for me, because the first time that she has any sort of vision, it's just like a child singing, and then there's like a tree and there's a little sparkle in it, and then it basically goes away and she's woken up, or maybe it was the pilot or Asbel that woke up. But anyway, so like, it was very brief, and I was like, what is going on with that tree? But then when she returns to it later, we see, because I think there's 3 different instances in which we have these visions. So the second one, it shows her as a child. We actually get to see what she looked like as a child, and then there's her father, and it just seems so tragic. I don't even know what he was telling her, but you can tell that they're like aristocracy, the way they're dressed, and then her mother is actually there in that vision, so we do know that her mother must have died sometime between when she was at that age and then when she's older. But there's something about it that was so haunting and tragic. But then when we have the final vision, we finally like put all the pieces together. It's Nausicaä, and what she's been hiding in that tree, that sparkle we saw in the tree, is actually a baby Ohm. And I kind of wonder if it's the same baby Ohm that she saves later, because they both grew in size. The Ohm was very small in that one. But yeah, she doesn't want her father and the men to kill it, and she's crying. And I think the father or one of the men is like, the insects have bewitched her. But yeah, and then the father tries to tell her, like, sweetie, insects and humans cannot live in the same world. And at this moment in time, we really see that she's more afraid of the human beings than she is afraid of the insects. Because we get this cool imagery where it's like a bunch of hands like stretching out, and it looks like they're trying to grab her. Really, they're trying to get the Ohm out of her arms. But really, that scene kind of showed that she as a child had more to fear from other humans than that baby Ohm. And she just starts crying, don't kill it, please don't kill it. And we start to kind of fade away. And another thing to note about these scenes is that the illustration design actually changes. It's more like, it kind of looks like watercolor. It's more faded and sketchier. And that helps, to me, I think, emphasize that it's a memory. And that's why it kind of has that faded look to it. But what do you think?
Yeah, that's very interesting, because some of the part I want to believe that it's just like a flashback as well, but because you also brought up like the medieval things, and also it's somehow recalled me up the Greek culture, so it's more about fate and vision, like what will
Yeah.
happen. So I was like, I don't know if it is like the vision that shows she's going to be the next hero of the world, like she also in blue coat and work in like the golden field, like in the vision
Yeah.
just brought. And yeah, I don't know, maybe it's just like, to me, a side of like a new hero is born, and then just like a bright future that they are going to be there very soon. So
I
yeah.
think it's both. I think it is a memory, but I also think it is this representation that she's special. It's showing that since childhood, she's had this connection and sympathy and compassion for nature. So it's kind of setting up, the beginning of her origin story to fulfilling the role of this savior in the legend. So I think it functions as both.
Yeah.
But
very
yeah,
interesting.
do you want to talk about the end scene when she does fulfill the prophecy?
Yeah, sure. If you want to touch on that, I don't think I have a lot. I just connected with the very last scene of the movie with a little sprout. So
Okay, I'll let you end on that then, because I had
Yeah.
something that was before that. So I was just going to talk about the fact that her clothing changes colors, because that's a pretty big thing. She's originally wearing pink because she's escaped from the Pageite ship, and they dressed her in their clothes. So it's like this pink outfit. But then later when we see her, when she's trying to stop the stampede, it's blue, and it's fully blue. So my interpretation of it is that it's because of the baby blue Ohm. Its blood is blue, and so it has completely drenched her dress in blue. And so that fits the prophecy, however, because the prophecy was that it would be this savior in foreign clothes that are blue on this like golden field. And so she's in foreign clothes and it's blue, right? So we know she's the savior. And so there's some beautiful quotes, such as the lady Obaba. Okay, yeah, sorry. These names are weird. Obaba. She says, the princess has quieted the rage of the Om. She gave her life to save the valley. And so and then we hear the child singing again. And so once again, this kind of reconnection. This was her destiny all along, this mythical legend. And then the Oms actually start to heal her with their, like, tentacles, I guess. Tentacles. And they interwoven, like, around her, and it creates, like, this gold platform. And so that's also part of the legend. And I just remember someone saying, who knew how wonderful and caring the Om could be? And it's like, that's exactly the point. Humanity did not give them a chance to show their compassionate side. They just immediately labeled them as, like, these evil creatures, when in reality, they were just reacting to the circumstances that humans put them in. But yeah, I feel like that scene was really good. It just shows that, after 1,000 years of darkness, there's finally this princess who has come along, and she's gonna reestablish order and balance, and it's really beautiful. And yeah, I don't know if I had anything else other than this other quote about the Om in general, because that's such a significant part to the end scene, is that the anger of the Om reflects the anger of the earth. The earth knows it's wrong for us to survive.
I love that. Yeah, so I don't have a lot about the ending scene, but I just felt it's very interesting to relate one of the quote in one of the scene to the previous episode we're talking about the wind rises. So we all know, like, even though the main theme of the movie is very heavy on a lot of wars, a lot of, like, violence, the ending also gives hope to the future. And even though the disease is still there, but people will gradually find a way to live like harmoniously with the nature. And I think it's a perfect match with the theme in The Wind Rises, particularly to the quote, "The wind is rising, we must try to leave."
Yeah.
And I kind of think it fit very well. And it's very interesting when I go through the manga version of Nausicaa. So for those who doesn't know, so the movies is released in 1984, but the manga hadn't, like, finished until, like, 10 years later. So Miyazaki decided to end it in a very simple way, with the one we saw in the movie as well, the image of the sprout. And in the movie, there's no quote except for the end part in the movie. But in the manga version, they have a small quote above the sprout that said, "We must leave." So I think it's very provide a vision of, like, a future, a very bright future that these people in the movies is going to move forward to. So I found it's very interesting to connect that way, and with the quote from The Wind Rises as well. So yeah.
Yeah, that was a really good connection. It's interesting to see how the films that compare to this movie is Princess Mononoke, The Castle in the Sky, which those make sense, and then it's like The Wind Rises, but it does connect in, like, kind of a weird way, because those two movies are about very different things. So it's just kind of cool to see them connect. A little unexpected, but I like it.
Yeah. So do you have any other things to say, or we can move to the ranking section?
Not so much. I really did enjoy this film. We're dealing with finals right now, so honestly, I feel like I want to talk more about this film, but I would have to really do some more research. So I don't know, maybe in the future I'll do an independent project and analyze more details. But yeah, that's all I have for this one, at least. I really enjoyed it. So
Yeah. Now at the moment I read a description about the movie, I believe, like, you gonna like that because you lie about the environment a lot. And
I
don't know.
love dystopians. I don't know if anyone listening or Betty even knows this, but I'm a sucker for, like, dystopians. So
Yeah.
my favorite book is, I think we've talked about this, I really like Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood, which is another environmentally focused novel dystopian. And then also we talked about Brave New World one time, I think. So
Yes.
yeah, love these dystopians.
Yeah. So how will you rank it? 5 out of 5 or?
Okay, I want to do 5 out of 5. However, there is some things that aren't as impressive as other Ghibli movies. Like, we really see how Miyazaki has evolved in his career, but for personal reasons, I'm still going to rate it 5 out of 5.
Yeah, so I found this movie is very interesting. I enjoyed the topic and the wholesome world buildings, even though some parts scare me out. But yeah, but I love the beautiful soundtrack as well, and I found it's connect very well to all other movies that Miyazaki is going to create later on. However, I do believe like the pace of the movie is kind of slow in my opinion. So some part just make me feel like I want to skip. So
It was a 2-hour film, I will say. Like Porco
yeah,
Rosso did so much, and it was way shorter.
yeah, it just so long, but I don't know if it's intentional or not. But yeah,
That's fair.
and I rank it just like 4.5 out of 5.
That's
Yeah,
that's
I
totally fair.
subtract a 0.5 for my phobia.
For the trypophobia.
Yeah.
You know, valid, completely valid. But yeah, so to those listening, thank you for tuning into our conversation. We love talking all things Ghibli. And so just to discuss some things to look forward to from us in the future. So next week we do plan on recording an episode where we're going to discuss another one of Miyazaki's films that is non-Ghibli called, and I'm not going to say it correctly at all, but The Castle of Cagliostro, which came out in 1979. So we're going back even further in time. So this one will be a bit of an oldie. And we're excited to bring you also some just like information on Miyazaki's career and how he went from the Castle of Cagliostro in Nausicaa to the Ghibli films. So kind of explaining that transition.
Yeah, it's kind of backward, but we'll
Yeah.
get there.
We'll get there. And then past all that, next semester, we hope to continue on the series and we'll cover Ghibli films that are not by Miyazaki. So some fan favorites, what is a fan favorite?
Just like some famous one.
Yeah, I would say a lot of people like, don't a lot of people like Whisper of the Heart. That's pretty well.
I love that one.
Yeah.
It's just like a slice of life, and it's so cute. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I kind of love Only Yesterday.
Uh-huh.
Ocean Waves is kind of good, but I just don't like the boy. Just like there's a scene that give me a bad impression about him. But yeah.
So
but-
we'll get to cover all that. And then this summer, How Do You Live by Miyazaki is coming out. So you know we'll be in the theaters for that.
Yeah.
So we'd love to discuss that with y'all. And also we need to make an Instagram for just our Ghibli series because I just want to see comments. I want to see like what people think and what y'all's interpretations are because I think that's the best thing about making podcasts and discussing films is learning what other people thought because we all have very different backgrounds and perspectives.
Yeah. And for you, Ghibli open a lot of interpretation, so I do want to know like what people think. So yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening today, guys, and we will see you next time.
Yeah. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.
Bye.